Hi, I'm Scotty.
And I'm Mike.
And in honor of Pride Month, we thought it'd be a great idea to share our coming out stories. I haven't really shared a lot of personal stuff online or really done this sort of stuff before, but
Same.
I do think it's very important to talk about these things, kind of share our experiences and our journeys and hopefully connect with someone out there who might need to hear this right now.
I think we take a lot for granted that it's 2019. We're a little bit further along, but there are people who have not had our experiences, and we've had quite the journeys ourselves.
Yeah.
But I think, point being, it's important to keep talking about it.
For sure.
Communication, conversation.
So here we go. So I started to notice that I was, I guess, a little different than most of my guy friends at the end of freshman year in high school. I didn't necessarily know what was going on. I just knew that I wasn't as into my high school girlfriend as I guess should have been or thought I should be.
What was her name?
No, we're not doing names. So I was kind of questioning a bunch of stuff, and obviously I grew up with Google and HBO. So by the end of that summer going into sophomore year, I was like, Oh, okay. I know what's happening right now. Initially, I think I was in denial and kind of went through that sort of phase because back then there was a really one-dimensional representation of the LGBT community, especially men, in the media. And me being young, ignorant, and not knowing any better was but I don't really identify with the stuff I'm seeing on TV, but I like A, B, and C and this type of music and these type of sports. How could I be that? And obviously, looking back, it's dude, the community is a lot more diverse than it appeared to be.
Yeah, gay or
TV.
straight, it's all a spectrum, right?
For sure. Didn't know any better and was confused. So I first told a couple of friends at school when I was 14 or 15, and naturally, like most high schools do, half of the student body was aware of it, the very next.
So the camera cut out, but basically the entire school found out about it the next day, and I had to talk about it with pretty much everyone, and it sort of expedited the entire process for me. Okay, back to the video.
My group of guy friends held a meeting at the school cafeteria, and they were like, so we just want to make sure we're all on board here, everything's cool, no one's weird about this, and they were like, yeah, and they all signed off on it.
Were you there for this?
I wasn't, but I found out about it afterwards, and I was like, that's the most adorable thing I've ever heard.
That's kind of super cute, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, oh, thank you guys. They talked about it. They weren't just
Right, in a nice way to be this isn't an issue.
So they were super great about it, and I was on the varsity sports teams, student council, and in the school play, so I feel like I kind of just did a bit of everything, and thankfully it wasn't that big of an issue for me, but I know that a lot of people's experiences were not necessarily that great.
So I knew I was gay or different or whatever, honestly, since I was 4 years old. My experience was different than yours in the sense that I grew up in a very, very conservative Republican family in Arizona. A big family, Catholic, religious, obviously. So I didn't obviously have the vocabulary as a 4-year-old, but I will never forget, I remember I was very in love with one of my friends, and I'm 4 years old, obviously innocent, but I remember being when I started to understand the concept of marriage, I was oh, well, I'm gonna marry him, and then I'll have a couple dogs and stuff. And I remember yeah, I was very goal-oriented from a young age. I'll also never forget that someone basically made it clear that was not okay, or that's not how it was going to be, that's not how it worked, and nor should we have that conversation ever again, and that I would be marrying a woman. And I remember being four or five, and it's one of my earliest memories, honestly. But just the sense of oh, I'm different than everyone else. And I told you this last year, I found out that apparently I basically said as much to my grandma when I was 4 or 5 years old. And I was I'm different, they won't let me be different, and was having a breakdown over it. I know that sounds a little sad, but I think it's interesting because I think that's indicative of the whole nature versus nurture thing. I was born in the most religious, conservative family possible, and that's who I was,
yeah.
With no exposure to anything. So, boo. But yeah, so I knew that from a very young age, but because of kind of the context of my cultural surroundings, I pushed that down very deep for a very, very long time. It's a weird thing to talk about, or just to think about, the human psyche and the tricks our own brain can play on ourselves. Because I always knew I was gay. Like even from there till high school, it always was in the back of my head, but it was like buried so deep that I didn't have the vocabulary I could never say that word to myself, like even in my head ever. But like I knew, like I always knew it was way back there. Anyways, so cut to a decade later, I have lots of girlfriends in high school. Just kidding, maybe like a few. Yeah, and I was a pretty social kid. I had like a good group of friends. One of my best friends in high school was gay though. He kind of went through the coming out process first, and I think we always knew on some level that like we were doing this journey together, but
Right.
mine was delayed compared to his. We found like kindred spirits in each other. But it wasn't even until after high school that I started to like really deal with that, because my friends came out I think junior senior year of high school, and I like tried to be supportive through that and everything. So it wasn't really until after high school and when I went to college and moved out of Arizona that I like really started to have these conversations with myself. Well, actually, I went to ASU for 1 year, and that's where I kissed my first boy and things. And I was seeing a guy and a girl at the same time. Whoops. But once I moved to Boston and kind of like found my people and was like in a very liberal, welcoming, kind of love-based environment, that's where I kind of like really was able to like have these conversations with myself, kind of do some exploring, kind of see like it was okay, and to have friends and be like introduced to people who were from different areas of the country and had maybe not as religious families, and just to see like, oh well, like they're doing fine, and like their whole family's really happy, and it's like not a thing. So yeah, it wasn't really until I was like 18, 19.
I knew I really wanted to tell my family. I just did not know how to do it. So my strategy was to tell my sister, who I was closest with. I told my sister when we were 17, we were on vacation in like Quebec or something, and her and I went on like a bike ride or like mountain biking or something. And I really wanted to tell her, and I kind of wanted her like basically as an ally, like on my team, in the event that like my parents were like not cool with it. I just remember like barely being able to get the words out and being like, will you love me no matter what? And she was like, yeah. And she probably thought it was like something way worse. She probably thought I was like on the run from the police or like arrested or something. But I was like, I'm gay. And she was like, okay. At the time I had a boyfriend and I was seeing somebody. No shade to anyone, but like I think they picked up on the fact that he was like a little different than like my other guy friends in the past. And so she was like, well, he seems really sweet. And that was me coming out to my sister.
And now when I met her, she talks about his drag box.
What?
She talks about your little, she means your box of like props and like costumes and stuff, but she calls it your drag box.
Does she really? I feel
She
like
does.
but that's because I think I told her to call it that, because that's what I referred to it as.
Can come up with whatever excuse you want.
I decided that my mom was like the next one to tell. And so
Start with the women.
I spent a lot of time with my mom and sister growing up, so I was like, naturally, she's like the next person to tell. I remember waiting for like the perfect moment to say it, and I was like waiting for the stars to align. I realized that, look, it's going to be challenging and difficult to share this with her, regardless of like what time of day it is or what day of the week it is. Like, just go for it. There were like a few failed attempts where like I literally, like my body would shut down and I'm like, I can't even say it.
You're like, Mom, I just want to talk to you about
And I
that poutine recipe.
And moms are like, they're super intuitive, like they know these kind of things. I think I finally just kind of told her, like, I didn't just tell her I was gay, I was like, I have a boyfriend. And she was like, oh, okay, you sure about all of this? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I'm sure, like this is it. You know, she gave me a hug, but the following morning she came up to me and gave me a huge hug and was like, I will love you no matter what. I just want you to be happy. And that was literally something I will never forget.
Aren't those words so important though? Like whether you're a family member or like even if you're like a best friend and your friend comes out to you and you're like, yeah, duh. Like, of course, like I already knew that. It's so important to hear that, like, well, like, that's great, I love you no matter what, and like, you know, just those words of validation in those moments, no matter how unsurprised you are or surprised you are, it's really important. So yeah, it's awesome that was like her go-to response.
So the final level in this Super Mario video game of coming out for me, and the final boss was my dad.
I want to play that game.
Who, Rainbow Road, I mean, that's Mario Kart. I guess
Yeah.
it's similar. They're on their way there. My dad is a former college hockey player that grew up on an Air Force base. I felt really bad for my mom because for the longest time I felt like she was almost
Yeah, like having to keep
keep a secret from her husband. And you know, there were a couple of moments where he would mention or ask something about girls, and I would kind of just get really quiet, and we'd all kind of like quickly change the subject. And I'm sure he started picking up on it, like, okay, like, why are we being so weird whenever this comes up? My dad actually kind of made it easier for me and asked me. He came up into my room one day, I think I was like 17, 18, and he was like, so, you and blank, are you and I was like, yeah, we are. And he's like, and you're sure about this? And I was like, yeah. He's like, all right. And then he left and walked away. From what I understand, there were some tears, and this is a man that I've maybe seen cry twice in my life. They weren't tears of like, I'm disappointed. It was more like, I just don't want the world to be mean to my baby, because you know,
dad's cry is hard.
it's the worst. Honestly, pictured a world where like I just never tell my dad and my parents, and I just can't share it with them. And now the first thing they ask me when they see me is like how Michael's doing, and you know what he's up to, and about your family, and you know how they're all doing. So it's just kind of interesting to me that how far people can come if you give them the chance and work with them.
So my experience was a little bit different, but I had a similar strategy because I'm the oldest of 5. So it's like, all right, if I can get some of my brothers on my team, then maybe they'll help show my parents like it's not that big of a deal, like we don't care, you know. So that's what I did. I told 2 of my brothers first. I think they were still in high school at the time, but they were like, I don't think they were surprised by any means. And I had a backup plan of like where I was gonna live, how to get through college, and all that stuff. So it could have gone worse, but it didn't go great. The Catholic teachings on Catholicism are bogus, but they are what they are, and it wasn't great. So the next few years, you know, coming home was a little bit of an awkward thing. I started to kind of live with my best friend's family, like during summers, between college and stuff. But that being said, I think I am one of many examples in like time heals everything, and no matter how bad you think it is in the moment, you just gotta give it time, which is the hardest thing in the world, because like there's no fast forward button on life, and the kind of waiting it out can obviously suck. But I mean, it was a slow burn, and it was a long journey for us. And you know, like a year or two later, at one of my brother's graduations, after several beers, you know, I kind of started to talk to my parents a little bit more about it, and kind of gauge their temperature. And year by year, it got better and better. I was in a relationship, you know, and then they started asking how he was, and slowly they wanted to like meet him and his family and whatever. Cut to a couple years later, and like they love him and ask about him all the time. In fact, the best thing that gives me like so much pride is just seeing where they are now, and how like my mom is like fiercely defensive of me, and she's like the sweetest woman in the world, literally a saint. But she, you know, when it comes to like gay marriage or the people talking about us in whatever capacity, she will like go to bat, you know, which like if you would have told me that 10 years ago, it would have been like, that will never be a thing. And same with my dad, you know, he's like, he thinks you're awesome. He included you in like a family like
That was so sweet.
Speech at my brother's graduation the other week. So the point being, and like I also recognize I'm very fortunate, because some people, that time doesn't necessarily heal everything, but I have found, and I've noticed in a lot of my friends' experiences as well, it may not get all the way where you want it to be, but there's a really good chance, and if not there, it'll definitely get better. And I feel like we have to say as a PSA, like God forbid it doesn't, and like your situation is not great, like the best part about our community is I think it's like a second family.
It is a chosen family.
Chosen family. And like we are both so lucky to have incredible biological families, but we also have incredible chosen families that are just as important and just as supportive and there for us, you know. Give it time, find your tribe. I'm Dr. Seuss.
Find your tribe.
That was a rhyme.
You're on fire. coming out was the best decision I've ever made, and I am genuinely like the happiest I've ever been. Obviously, you are a huge part of that. Thank you. I love you so much.
It's
There are
much
plenty-
better on the other side.
It is.
Feels tumultuous for a while, but it's so much better.
Thanks for watching, guys. Those were our coming out stories. I hope you guys enjoyed listening, and happy Pride Month. to
Happy
all.
Pride, yes.
If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a big like, hit that thumbs up button, and if you enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe. We'll be back very soon with another video.
Tap that button. Peace.